things can't go over 0 decibels, okay? Traditionally, when you put something out for CD or for radio, you had to make it sound as loud as possible. So if you push things over 0 decibels and you look at the audio file, you'll just see that the tops of the curves, you zoom into the top, you'll see they just get squashed. So anything under that squash gets pushed down in volumes. And then there was this whole thing about mastering engineers getting pushed to make things sound louder. So the maximum volume doesn't increase, but the perceived volume increases because the tops of the curves are getting squashed down and everything else is getting pushed up to 0 decibels again. So that's the difference between perceived volume and actual volume. Just the maximum volume of those peaks are not what they sound like anymore. So the problem was, the more you push that up, the more everything gets squashed and the harder it is to make it sound good. And that's where mastering engineers became experts, but they got pushed too far and rebelled, sort of. Then Spotify and stuff like that came out. Now on Spotify, you've got all sorts of people releasing music. Some of them get it professionally mastered and some of them are just doing like hack jobs themselves. They don't really know what they're doing. All they're doing is they're boosting the volume. They're squashing those peaks and they don't know how to make it sound good, because that's a skill. So Spotify came along, took this into consideration, and their system, instead of working to 0 decibels, works to -6 decibels. So anything that's coming up to 0 decibels, when you upload to Spotify and a lot of the other online distributors, they'll just reduce it straight by 6 decibels. And that's because versus the people that aren't doing professional mastering, where it sounds quieter, they won't get reduced as much. And if it's quite quiet, they'll actually boost it, but there'll be less squashing of the peaks in those. Some squashing of the peaks can actually make it sound better. The point is, I mastered to 0 decibels and just let Spotify reduce it down by 6 decibels. If I hadn't mastered it to 0 decibels, Spotify would have just done the squashing or the reduction or increase. You know, by mastering to 0 decibels, I take control of that situation, but it also means I do more squashing than maybe some people would prefer. Less squashing gives a bit more dynamics, but the better you get at mastering, the more you can actually use the squashing to make the recording sound better, to actually give it some character. But that depends on what devices or plugins you're using to do the squashing and how well you know to use them. So my concern when I'm asking for feedback is if anyone said it's been squashed too much. I think it sounds great. I love the saturation on it. I was a bit bright with the high end. That might not be to everyone's taste, but I could have taken that further. The recording I got was actually pretty good, but there was a lot of high end missing. But once you brought in the high end and put that all through a compressor and all the different effects that I sent you, actually it all gelled together really nicely. So that was a really nice recording and mix to start with. So there we go. My mastering to 0 decibel. It's finished one.